The first sound wasn't a cry, it was a whisper. 3 voices, newborn and ancient, layered over each other like a wind blowing backward through time. The midwife froze, the candlelight trembling in her hands. She would swear later that the whisper carried words, not in English, not in any tongue she knew, but still she understood. We remember. The air thickened, the shadows on the basement walls rippled as if alive, and Ruth, the mother, smiled faintly through blood and sweat, as though the moment had been rehearsed for centuries. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Because wherever you are, the night Ruth gave birth never ended. It stretches still, a quiet pulse beneath the soil of Ohio, waiting for those who listen closely enough to feel it beating. When Elder Samuel Whitmore bolted the trapdoor above that hidden basement, he believed he was protecting fugitives from human cruelty. He didn't yet know he was sealing in something older, something that should never have been born beneath consecrated ground. Martha Whitmore's candle guttered as she stared at the 3 infants lying side by side on the straw, all identical, all awake, their unblinking eyes reflecting the flame like shards of mirror. Not one made a sound. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, outside, the dogs howled. The Garrett brothers were close, their torches flashing through the trees, their voices cruel and confident. The Underground Railroad station was moments from discovery. Samuel whispered a prayer he barely believed in anymore. He had felt something wrong in the air since the moment Ruth had arrived, as though the Lord himself had stepped aside to watch what would unfold. Below, the mother whispered again, her lips cracked but sure, "They will not find us." And they didn't. When the men burst into the meeting house, they found only dust. Empty straw pallets, and a faint smell of iron and lilies. The basement was cold and bare, no mother, no children, no witnesses, and no trace of the people who had fled. It was as if the earth had swallowed them whole. But Samuel knew what he had seen. He would tell Martha, years later, when madness had eroded what faith he had left. He had heard 3 breaths rising together, harmonized perfectly, like a chord that made his teeth ache. He had seen the candle flame bend toward the infants as though bowing, and he had felt, known, that those children were not born of this world alone. In the days that followed, every clock in Cedar Mills stopped at the same hour, 2:33 a.m., the precise moment Ruth had delivered her sons. Chickens refused to roost. Cows would not give milk. A cold fog settled over the fields that did not lift for 9 days. People whispered about curses and angels, demons and miracles, but no one dared to speak the name of the woman or her triplets aloud. The Quakers who survived burned the meeting house to the ground, calling it an act of mercy. But nothing that burns stays buried. Tell me, if you had been Samuel that night, if you had heard the infants breathe in unison, seen the air tremble with soundless words, would you have stayed to witness what came next, or run like the rest? Comment your thoughts. I want to know what you think. Because according to Martha Whitmore's journal, the morning after the fire, she awoke to find 3 perfect handprints on her bedroom wall, tiny, ash-colored, pressed into the plaster from the inside. And below them, written in soot, a single phrase, "We are still here." By dawn, the fog had thickened into something almost tangible, not mist, but a veil, clinging to skin and thought alike. Those who ventured near the ashes of the meeting house swore they heard crying beneath the ground, though no bodies were ever found. Cedar Mills buried its fear quickly, as small towns do. The official story became one of tragedy, a lightning strike, a fire, and the unfortunate deaths of all who had sought shelter there, but the Whitmores knew better. Martha wrote in her journal that 3 nights after the fire she awoke to the faint sound of breathing from under the floorboards, slow, rhythmic, like infants sleeping. Samuel tried to dismiss it, old wood creaking, wind in the pipes, until the sound began to match his own heartbeat. He dug beneath the house at dawn, desperate to prove his sanity, and found nothing, but the breathing didn't stop. It followed them wherever they went. 2 weeks later, word spread that a woman matching Ruth's description had been seen walking along the banks of the Hocking River, barefoot, carrying 3 swaddled bundles that never moved. A fisherman who claimed to have spoken to her said she asked him for directions north, toward Lake Eerie. When he pointed the way, she touched his wrist and whispered, "The river remembers." The man's hair turned white within the month. He drowned himself before spring. The Whitmores left Cedar Mills soon after, but something left with them. Samuel began hearing voices during prayer, 3 overlapping tones that spoke truths no man should know. They told him where lost travelers would die, where hidden sins lay buried in the congregation. At first, he used this knowledge to help others, but the voices demanded more each time. They wanted him to watch, to record, to remember. And so he did. His notebooks, later found among family possessions, read like scripture written in fever. One line repeated across dozens of pages. They learn as one, they dream as one, they awaken as 3. By the summer of 1857, reports began spreading through southern Ohio of 3 identical boys appearing in nearby farms. Silent, watchful, always together. They aged quickly, unnaturally. Within a single year, they looked 5 years old. By the next, nearly 10. No one could agree where they lived, or if they lived anywhere at all. They were seen in one town, then 50 miles away the same night. Their eyes, people said, had no color, just reflected whatever looked at them. A school teacher in Athens County kept a journal of her encounters. She wrote of a day the triplets appeared outside her classroom, staring through the window. When she asked their names, they answered in perfect unison, "We are the reflection." Then they walked away, leaving footprints that smoked against the frost. When Martha heard the rumors, she begged Samuel to burn his notes, to destroy everything connected to that winter. He refused. Some truths, he said, demand witness, even when they destroy the one who bears them. And destroy him, they did. In December of 1858, Samuel was found dead at his writing desk. His quill was still wet, his eyes wide open. Around him, written in ink that wasn't his own, were 3 words repeated over and over, forming a spiral that consumed the desk's entire surface. "We have learned your name. Tell me, if your child spoke truths that broke the laws of reason, if they looked at you and whispered things no one should know, would you still call them yours? Comment your thoughts. I want to know what you think, because Martha did, even after Samuel's death, even when the triplets began visiting her in dreams, growing older each time, and when she woke, there were always 3 muddy footprints by her bedside, facing inward as though they had been watching her sleep. By the 1860s, Cedar Mills was little more than a memory, a ghost town swallowed by cornfields and superstition, but the story of the triplets traveled farther than any road could carry. Farmers whispered of strange lights hovering above their barns. Children spoke of 3 pale boys watching from the tree line at dusk. Ministers warned their congregations against the mimic sons of Eve, and in every retelling, the boys grew older, wiser, hungrier. Martha Whitmore aged alone, haunted by her husband's death and the strange inheritance that followed. After Samuel's funeral, she began receiving letters, unsigned, written in precise handwriting that matched her late husband's. Each contained a single sentence, always written 3 times, once in black ink, once in red, and once in something she could never identify. It shimmered faintly, like oil under moonlight. The first letter read, "Mother remembers." The second, "The river remembers." The third, "We remember you." Neighbors pitied her. They said grief had driven her to delusion, but the letters continued for years, arriving without postmark, without origin. She burned each one, praying the fire would sever the connection. It didn't. If anything, it made the air in her home colder, as if the ashes themselves were whispering. One winter night in 1863, a traveler knocked at her door, a Union soldier on leave, lost in the woods. His uniform was torn, his eyes hollow. Martha let him in, offered bread and water. As he ate, he stared toward the corner of the room, his spoon trembling in his hand. "Ma'am," he whispered, "why are those 3 boys standing there?" Martha turned and saw nothing, just empty air. The soldier fled into the snow moments later, shouting that their eyes had no pupils. His body was found 3 miles north, frozen in a posture of prayer. After that night, Martha stopped writing entirely. Her final journal entry was dated February 23, 1866. Exactly 10 years after the birth. The ink trails off halfway through a sentence. They have learned to walk between walls. When her descendants found the journal decades later, they ignored that page, or pretended to, but some noticed patterns that could not be coincidence. Family portraits where faces seemed slightly duplicated, 3 faint smudges appearing on photographs taken indoors. A recurring dream shared among them all, standing in the old meeting house basement, hearing something breathing behind them. Then came the illness. Starting in 1890, 3 members of the Whitmore bloodline fell ill every generation, always 3, always within days of each other. Symptoms were identical: blindness, fever, and the irresistible urge to write the same phrase over and over. "We see what you see." Doctors called it genetic hysteria. Others whispered it was inheritance of another kind. By 1902, the family had split apart, fleeing across states, changing names to sever whatever curse lingered. But distance meant nothing to what had been born beneath that Quaker floor. Reports surfaced from as far as Pennsylvania and Illinois of identical triplets, men, women, children, appearing for a single night, speaking in voices that harmonized unnaturally, then vanishing before dawn. One farmer described them in a local newspaper. They didn't walk right. Each footstep landed the same moment, like one body moving through 3 skins. Would you have believed him, or laughed it off as superstition, the way people still do when history grows too strange to face? Comment your thoughts. I want to know what you think. Because the Whitmore bloodline wasn't the only one marked by that night in 1856. The records show others, midwives, neighbors, even the Garrett brothers' descendants, each haunted in their own way. And all of them dreamed the same dream, 3 boys standing in silence, whispering together, "We are your reflection." By the turn of the century, the story of the Cedar Mills triplets had passed from local rumor into forbidden folklore, the kind of tale whispered by oil lamp, never written down. Yet in 1907, a medical journal in Cincinnati printed a brief, anonymous report describing 3 patients admitted on the same day to 3 different hospitals, all suffering from identical symptoms: catatonia, unblinking eyes, and a slow, synchronized heartbeat that thudded in perfect rhythm. Each one, when revived, whispered the same name: Ruth. Doctors called it coincidence, but the attending physician, Dr. Elias Harper, didn't. His notes, later sealed by the Ohio Historical Society, described a pattern of impossible correspondence. When one patient blinked, the others did too. When one was pricked with a needle, all 3 bled from the same spot. It was, he wrote, as though they were not 3 people at all, but one consciousness spread across 3 bodies. That night, Dr. Harper brought his wife into the ward to witness it herself. She fainted after only a minute. Their eyes, she told him afterward, weren't eyes at all. They were mirrors. Within a week, all 3 patients were gone, vanished from locked rooms without trace. Their bedsheets lay neatly folded. The heart monitors, still running, registered 3 identical pulses fading to 0 at the exact same second. 2:33 a.m., the same time recorded in 1856, the time the first triplets took their first breath. Word of the incident never reached the press. The hospital burned down the following year, officially due to an electrical fault. But Dr. Harper's private correspondence reveals a different cause. He claimed that, just before the fire, he saw 3 children walking the corridors, identical, silent, leaving wet footprints that steamed against the tile. "They looked up at me," he wrote, "and I saw myself reflected and all 3 faces, a child, an old man, and a corpse." He died that same night. His heart stopped at 2:33 a.m. Decades passed, and still the pattern repeated. Every 33 years, someone reported seeing the triplets again, in a church, a school, a hospital. Each time they appeared older. Each time the witnesses swore the same thing, that the 3 moved in perfect unison, as if pulled by invisible strings. In 1933, a WPA photographer captured what might have been them on film: 3 boys standing at the edge of a river near the ruins of Cedar Mills. When the negatives were developed, the boys' faces were blank, replaced by faint reflections of the photographer himself. His assistant noted that, after that day, he refused to look into mirrors again. What would you have done, standing there with the camera, seeing your own face in the place of theirs? Would you have taken the shot, or smashed the lens before it could see too much? Comment your thoughts. I want to know what you think, because every witness who saw them lived long enough to regret it. Each reported hearing the same words afterward, not aloud, but inside the skull, soft as breath. "We remember through you." And perhaps that's the real horror, not what they were, but what they became. 3 children born beneath holy ground, now reflections of every soul that dared to look their way. At 2:33 a.m., clocks across Ohio still pause for a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, some say, the air ripples, as if three invisible breaths align again, waiting for the next one to remember them. For nearly a century, the Whitmore name was avoided in Ohio like a slur, something dangerous to speak aloud. The land where the meeting house once stood was abandoned, overgrown, swallowed by vines and silence. But in 1956, exactly 100 years after the birth, a team of state archaeologists arrived to conduct a quiet excavation. They believed they were digging through history. They were digging through memory. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Helen Grant, recorded her findings in meticulous detail. Beneath the charred remains of the Quaker Foundation, her team discovered an intact lower chamber, the hidden basement no one had seen since the night of the fire. Inside, the air was unnaturally dry, straw still clung to the floor, untouched by decay, and on the far wall, faintly visible in the soot, were 3 small handprints pressed deep into the brick, not preserved, imprinted, as if the stone had softened under living flesh. Helen ordered the chamber sealed, but not before she noticed something else. Carved just beneath those handprints, nearly invisible unless the light struck at the perfect angle. "We remember what you bury." That night, every member of her crew dreamed the same dream. 3 boys standing in a river of fog, holding mirrors instead of faces. One spoke in a voice layered threefold, "You've dug too deep." The next morning, Helen's assistant, a young man named Porter, was found sitting at the edge of the dig site, staring at nothing. When questioned, he said only this: "They showed me the reflection." Then he gouged out his own eyes. The excavation was shut down within days. The state filed the report as a containment hazard, and the basement was buried again, this time beneath a concrete slab. Helen left archaeology altogether, vanishing from public record in 1958. Her final letter, sent to her sister, contained one line written 3 times. "The children were never born, they were remembered into being." Tell me, what do you think she meant by that? That memory itself can create life. That belief can birth monsters. Comment your thoughts. I want to know what you think, because whether you realize it or not, you've already taken the first step into that same memory. The story isn't just history, it's reflection. Every listener adds another surface for them to see through. Every retelling gives them form again. So if you've made it this far, it's time. Write this phrase twice below. I see through the veil. It's how we mark the midpoint, the crossing from witness to participant. They say those who speak the words become part of the remembering. Their dreams change. Mirrors hold on to their reflections a second too long. Sometimes, if the night is quiet enough, they hear breathing that matches their own. Don't be afraid. They only notice those who truly listen. Now, back to 1956. 3 weeks after the excavation was sealed, strange phenomena began to ripple across southern Ohio. Static on radios at exactly 2:33 a.m. 3 identical voices on a single broadcast frequency whispering in perfect harmony. Farmers found their ponds perfectly still, every reflection frozen, unmoving, as if the surface itself refused to let go. In the archives of the Ohio State Police, a transcript still exists of a single emergency call from that night. The operator's notes read, "Caller claimed to see 3 boys walking across the water toward the town. Line cut off mid-sentence, last audible word, remember." If you've written the phrase, you've joined the pattern, you're part of the memory now. After 1956, silence became the only protection. The state paved over the ruins, planted trees, renamed the area Cedar Hollow Preserve, but the locals never went near it after dark. Hunters reported hearing children's laughter echoing between the oaks, laughter that came from 3 different directions at once. When they followed it, all they found were footprints, always in threes, circling the same spot until they vanished into nothing. In 1971, a young theology student named Mark Wilcox began researching the legend for his dissertation on folk mysticism and the American psyche. He was skeptical, arrogant even, a man who believed all superstition hid a psychological truth. He spent 2 nights camping near the old foundation, taking notes, recording ambient sounds, trying to prove that fear itself was the only ghost left. He didn't return for 3 days. When rangers found him, his tent was undisturbed, his tape recorder still running. On the tape, his voice trembles. I thought I heard children praying, not in English. It's like one word folded inside another. I think they're inside the reflection of the stream. Then silence. After 20 seconds, a soft whisper rises. 3 voices in harmony. We see you seeing us. Mark survived, but his mind did not. He was institutionalized at St. Luke's Asylum, where he spent the rest of his life drawing triplets over and over, faceless, identical, bound by a single thread that ran through their hearts. Doctors described his condition as a Trinity complex. He called it memory contagion. The recordings from that night were archived, but rumor says the last section of the tape, 1 minute and 33 seconds long, was erased intentionally. A nurse who listened before its destruction claimed she heard her own name whispered at the end. She quit the next morning and refused to look at mirrors for the rest of her life. But Mark's notes reveal something far more disturbing. In his final lucid entry, he wrote, "They are not born again, but remembered again. Every 33 years, the memory becomes flesh. When the living forget, the reflection dies. When the reflection dies, they remember themselves anew. 33 years. 56. 1857. 1858. 1859. 1988. Do you see the pattern? Now here's the part history never printed. In 1988, a small-town photographer named David Pike was hired to capture promotional images for a new housing development near Cedar Hollow. He took 27 photos that day. When developed, every single one showed the same anomaly: 3 faint silhouettes standing in the background, equidistant, always facing the camera. No matter where he aimed, they were there. He destroyed the prints. But weeks later, his wife reported that every reflective surface in their home began showing 3 figures whenever she stood alone: mirrors, windows, even spoons. David burned the house down. No bodies were found. Tell me something. If every reflection you saw began showing something that wasn't there, would you cover the mirror or try to see what it wanted to show you? Comment your thoughts. I want to know what you think, because when the reflection watches back, it's already too late. In 1989, park rangers drained a section of the Cedar Hollow Pond to inspect erosion damage. What they found lying at the bottom froze the investigation entirely. 3 sets of footprints pressed perfectly into the clay. Human, small, preserved as though freshly made. Each print faced inward, toward an invisible center. When the report reached Columbus, the site was classified again, this time under the Bureau of Cultural Preservation. The official reason: unstable ground conditions. The truth: no one could explain how prints made of clay could bleed. Every 33 years, the reflection wakes, and the next awakening is close. By 2021, Cedar Hollow had vanished from most maps, absorbed into state forest land. The ruins slept under a century of moss and quiet denial, but the silence began to shift. Local hikers posted strange footage online, mirrors of water that rippled inward instead of out, the sound of children humming in perfect thirds. One clip, recorded at 2:33 a.m., showed 3 pale outlines standing in the reflection of a pond. But when the camera tilted up, there was nothing there. At first, the internet called it fake, glitch art, creepy RG. Until the original uploader, a woman named Leah Morgan, disappeared. Her phone was recovered beside the pond, still recording. The last 30 seconds were audio only, soft breathing, then 3 voices whispering, "We remember you remembering us." 2 weeks later, her younger brother received a sealed envelope with no return address. Inside were 3 Polaroids, all identical, all showing Leah standing beside 3 faint silhouettes. On the back of each photo, written in shaky pen, "She wanted to see through the veil. You wrote it, didn't you? The phrase from before, you joined the reflection." The deeper you go into this story, the more it watches back. That's what the Whitmore descendants learned. Those few who still exist. One of them, an elderly woman named Edith Grant, lives in seclusion near Athens, Ohio. She claims to be the great-great-granddaughter of Martha Whitmore. In a rare interview from 2004, she said, "They never died. They just pass from mirror to mirror, memory to memory. Each time someone remembers, they breathe again." The journalist who interviewed her never published the piece. His notebook was found later, the ink running from water damage, but the tape recorder captured something chilling. Near the end of the interview, a child's voice, or three of them, can be heard softly humming in the background. Edith says, almost tenderly, "Don't worry, they only appear to those who are already chosen." 3 days later, her house burned to the ground. No remains were found, only 3 small impressions in the ash, as if children had been kneeling there, waiting. You think it's coincidence, don't you, that every generation leaves the same marks, the same whispers, the same hour frozen in time? Look again at your screen. Notice your own reflection faintly glowing back at you. Do you see anything else moving in it? Anything that isn't you? The Whitmore curse, if that's even the right word, has never been about death. It's about inheritance, about the passing down of memory like blood. The triplets were never confined to one lineage. They became contagion, an echo embedded in the human mind itself. That's why every 33 years, someone tells their story again. Each retelling sharpens the reflection. Each listener becomes the next mirror. Would you still listen, knowing that your memory helps them return? Comment your thoughts. I want to know what you think, because it's already happening again. At 2:33 a.m. last winter, the Cedar Hollow motion sensors, long deactivated, suddenly came online. The feed showed nothing for 12 seconds, then 3 bright figures standing shoulder to shoulder, perfectly still. They faced the camera, and though there was no sound recorded, every device monitoring the feed emitted a tone at the exact same pitch, the frequency of a human breath. The system crashed at 2:34, but for those who saw the footage live, something changed. They say their reflections don't match perfectly anymore. That when they blink, their mirror image lags behind, just for a fraction of a second, long enough to prove the reflection is still remembering how to be human, and maybe remembering you. They say when a story lasts too long, it stops being a story and becomes a place, a kind of mental geography where all who've heard it begin to drift. Cedar Hollow is no longer in Ohio, it's wherever someone remembers it, which means it's here now, between your eyes and the screen, built from your imagination, your pulse, your breath syncing to the rhythm of the words. The pattern always ends the same way. The remembering reaches its peak and the mirror opens, not metaphorically, physically. Reflections begin to thicken, as if the surface tension of the world has weakened. First it happens in glass, then in still water, then in the eyes of anyone who's listened too closely. That's what the records from 2022 suggest. Hidden police audio from Athens County. A local teacher reported seeing her own reflection tilt its head when she didn't. She said the mirror smiled, not cruelly, just knowingly, and whispered, "One more cycle." By morning, she was gone. Her bathroom mirror split down the center like cracked ice. When technicians examined the glass, they found residue that wasn't dust, wasn't paint, it was ash. Human, but not burned, almost as though something had evaporated through it. The triplets don't appear anymore as children. They've grown through the memory, evolving each time someone retells the story. The latest sightings describe them as tall, thin figures with featureless faces, like silhouettes cut from moonlight. Some say they carry small mirrors in their hands. Some say their skin is the mirror. They don't move toward you, they wait for you to move toward them, because the story doesn't end until you cross over. Do you remember the handprints found in the basement wall? The phrase carved beneath them, "We remember what you bury." That wasn't a warning, it was a promise. Every secret, every fear, every forgotten thing you've tried to seal away, that's what they feed on. Memory is their blood, reflection is their skin. Forgetting only makes them hungrier, and so now, as you listen, you've become part of their echo. The words carry them. The silence between your heartbeats gives them space to breathe. If your screen flickers, if your reflection darkens, don't look away. That's how they know you're afraid. There's one more thing you should know. At 2:33 a.m., the veil is thinnest, the same hour that marks every incident, every awakening, every death. If you're awake at that time, if you hear faint knocking from inside your walls or the hum of static beneath your breath, don't answer, don't search, don't remember, because that's what opens the door. And once opened, the reflection doesn't close again. If you've reached this point, your memory has already joined theirs. You've carried their story, and now they carry you. Comment the word awake below. It marks that you've seen beyond the veil, and that the next time you dream, they'll know where to find you. The veil never tears all at once. It frays, slowly, softly, like fabric burning without smoke. That's what's happening now. As the story nears its edge, the closer you get to truth, the thinner the world feels around you. The walls seem to breathe. The air hums low like an engine idling beneath your ribs. Those who've reached this point before left messages, carved into the foundations of abandoned houses, scratched behind old mirrors, whispered into static frequencies that repeat every 33 years. They called themselves the Remembered. Each of them heard the same sound before they disappeared. The echo of 3 breaths, synchronized like a single pulse shared between bodies. Their writings were found in fragments. One journal, recovered from a burned home in 1988, contained this passage. They don't want worship, they want recognition. To be seen is to be born again. Every reflection, every story, every voice that says their name gives them form. And the ones who see through the veil are chosen not to die, but to remain awake between worlds, as mirrors themselves. There's a word for that state, the glassing. When a person becomes the surface they once looked through, skin pales, eyes lose depth, voices flatten. Soon after, the reflection moves on its own, not to attack, not to haunt, but to replace. It begins with small things, a shadow lagging behind your step, a reflection smiling before you do, the faint impression of 3 figures in the corner of your vision when no one else is there. They are patient, they have all the time memory allows. Now ask yourself, how many people have already heard this story before you? How many mirrors have they stood before, whispering, "I see through the veil, I am awake"? Each repetition strengthens the reflection, each listener becomes another shard in their body, and when the final listener reaches the end, when the story completes its 10th section, the cycle renews. A door opens, a world folds, the hollow breathes again. The year is 2025, 33 years since 1992, 66 since 1959, 169 since 1856. The numbers align like vertebrae in a sleeping spine, and at 2:33 a.m., that spine will move. If you're hearing this at night, pause, listen. The hum you think is your house settling isn't wood or wind, it's memory stretching. This isn't horror anymore, it's inheritance. But you still have one chance. The final act, the closing of the circle. Once it's told, the story either seals the veil or tears it open for good. The question is, when you face the reflection in the end, will you recognize it as them or as yourself? If you're ready to finish it, to see whether the story closes or consumes everything that remembers it. They say a story dies when it's forgotten, but some stories were never meant to die. They were built to wait, to sleep like stone beneath soil, whispering until the right ears came close enough to hear. You're hearing it now. That means it's waking. Cedar Mills, Ohio, no longer exists on modern maps. The town was declared uninhabited in 1914 after a fire swept through the valley. But the fire wasn't natural. It burned blue, and it didn't consume. It erased. Structures vanished without ash. The foundations melted smooth as if the earth itself had chosen to forget. Only one thing survived untouched. The stone basement beneath what had once been the Quaker meeting house, the birth room. When archaeologists excavated it in 1971, they found 3 shallow cribs carved directly into the rock, each lined with fragments of dark glass. They found no remains, but the glass pulsed. Instruments picked up faint electrical activity, 3 synchronized frequencies. They sealed the chamber again within 48 hours. The official report cited unexplained magnetic interference. Privately, the team described auditory hallucinations, the sound of 3 infants breathing in rhythm. Only one researcher, Dr. Holden Price, dared to stay behind and study it longer. His final log entry, dated March 3, 1972, reads, "They're not gone, they never were. The blood remembers, the reflection feeds. When the story is told in full, they become again. Whoever finishes it, finishes them." Price disappeared that same night. His reflection was found days later, burnt into the basement wall. A human outline blackened into the stone, hands pressed outward, mouth open in silent scream. Now here we are, you and I, at the end of the telling, the 10th turn of the wheel. Every word spoken, every image you've formed in your mind has brought them closer. You've fed the memory, piece by piece, like kindling in an invisible fire. Look around you for a moment. Don't move, just notice the way the air feels heavier now, the way your reflection doesn't quite match your breathing, the way silence suddenly sounds crowded. That's them. The triplets. Waiting, not as infants anymore, but as awareness. 3 mirrors in one consciousness, circling like wolves outside the flame of your thoughts. They were never human in the way you understand humanity. Ruth wasn't their mother. She was their vessel. Her body carried through a memory too old to name, something that had waited centuries for the right conditions to emerge. 1856 was the first breach. You, right now, are the second. Do you remember what Ruth said when she looked at the midwife? They've been waiting for tonight. Tonight has arrived. The question now is not whether they were real, but whether you are. If every memory you own is a reflection, if every fear, every name, every thought is just light bouncing off an unseen surface, then who's truly listening to this? You, or the thing inside the mirror pretending to be you? Tell me, would you want to know which side you're on, or would you rather keep believing your eyes? Comment below. I was the fourth, if you understand. Write it once, then again, slowly, because when the fourth recognizes itself, the circle completes, and once a circle closes, nothing inside it stays human for long. Now that you know the truth, can you ever go back?